Hello everybody, this is Connor at BoatsDon'tSink here with another deck profile for you guys from the recently released Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon. This time we have the 12 choice deck. I know what you're thinking to yourself right now. Connor, that's illegal. You can't put 12 climaxes in your deck. And I say, call a judge. Starting off with the deck list, we have a lot of one-ofs, surprisingly. I say I normally don't like to tech these decks out. I want them to be sort of blank slate starting points so that people can take them and adjust them as necessary to fit their own needs. But this one just kind of ended up a pile. This is the first deck I actually sleeved up when I started playing Danmachi when it came out in English. Obviously, like the 12 event deck was at the front of everyone's minds, so I knew I was going to get to that eventually, so I wanted to play something different. So instead of 12 events, we went with 12 choice. And we'll explain what that means here with our Climax Combos. So we're playing the 1-0 Reason for Her Strength Ice. This is on a choice trigger. It's ditch 1, check top 5, add 2. It's similar to like the Bang Dream combo, the Nanami, and Mash in Fate Grand Order. That's the other one that does the similar thing. It's just an advantage combo on a choice trigger. Our 3-2 is also on a choice trigger. It's similar to Mocha. It's you look at opponent's top 3 instead of their top 2. You don't get to look at your top, but you basically get to make them not cancel, which is kind of cool. It can kill people. Now you'll notice there's a third character here on our Climax combo page, but only 2 climaxes, and that's because our third character actually combos with both of the climaxes that are level 1 and our 3 combo with. It's a level 0, and if either of those 2 climaxes are in our climax area, it gains a choice trigger, which is how we're going to have 12 choice triggers. So we're playing 4 of each climax and 4 of the level 0. So that's our 12 choice triggers, which means we're going to hopefully be able to trigger a lot of choice triggers. So, looking a little deeper at this Ice 1-0 combo, on attack, if you have 4 or more other characters, you can choose one of your other characters, give it 2500. Makes it a little awkward that you can't pump itself, but you can turn your other lanes really big. This is, I mean, if you watch the 12 event video, you know that deck is just all about being really high on offensive power, being big, killing stuff. You can kind of do that in this deck. One thought, and I actually didn't include this in these slides at all, but the Pyonkichi event that salvages a character and pumps 4000 power, it was a thought to include that in here as well, or as an alternative option. But the Ice gets to pump 2500, which is pretty big, and we have lots of other high power characters, so we still have good offensive power lines in this deck. Climax Combo itself has to discard a yellow card. So we do have to make sure that there is a fair amount of yellow in this deck so that you have a legal target to discard in order to use your Climax combo. If it requires 5 or less stock as well, which means you're not going to be able to loop this throughout the game very well. You're kind of just going to want to hit a bunch of these as soon as you hit level 1 and then start building resources after that. It's discard yellow card, check top 5, add 2 characters, put the rest in waiting room. Pretty decent. As long as you have a card you're okay with discarding. One of the issues with these profiles in general is that if your hand is already sculpted, it's not great because you might have to throw away a card that's better than what you get. But again, we're mainly playing this for the choice trigger here because, you know, 12 choice. Our level 3 combo is an uncommon. It's on play heal from hand, or there's a level 0 that we play that can also bring it out, and that will let you heal as well. Climax combo itself is just on attack, pay 2, look at opponent's top 3, choose up to 3, put them back on top in any order, and then put the rest in the waiting room. Generally, you're just going to use this to leave clean damage on top and rip out any climaxes from their top 3. Because the climax is a 1k1, you're attacking for 3, meaning if you see 3 clean damage, you're basically guaranteed to stick, which is really cool. And I mean, digging 3 to find a climax means that, like, basically if they were going to cancel, you make them very unlikely to cancel afterwards. So this can just kill people by sticking 2 attacks, right? Like, they're 3-1 or whatever, and you just stick 2 3s. So it's not a bad combo at all, I don't think. It's just a little expensive and kind of bad against, like, decks that have deck manipulation at counter step. So if they have like torch effect where they can check their top 4 and add 1 or whatever, like they can just remove all that clean damage you stacked. So it's not great against a lot of those decks, but it's still more than good enough for what we need here. And our last card, the level 0 End of Special Training Ice, is Climax Combo. With either choice, it gains choice trigger icon. So this means that if you play either Climax and it's in your Climax area, and then you attack and trigger this level 0, you get to resolve the choice effect. Which means that ideally we're going to get a lot more stock and or hand than most decks that aren't playing like combos to generate those things. And at the same time, it means that we're going to have to focus a little more on fitting soul triggers in our deck, because we are going to need targets for our choice triggers. And I'm sure everyone that's built like 8 choice decks knows that, you know, you kind of have to work in just a couple extra choice triggers to make your 8 choice, you know, have enough targets. Other effect on this is just level 0 Stock Bomb, which is actually not a bad effect either. Since this is 500 power, being a level 0 Stock Bomb means that we can still answer cards like Hololive's Aqua, or the various level 0s that, when they're reversed, they can pay 1 to like save themselves for an additional turn. And a lot of those go to memory, some of them go to waiting room. We get to answer a lot of stuff like that, and like any on-death effects, Cheeries, so this is a card that's just good right now anyway, and it's an additional choice trigger. So I actually don't think you're having to like, sometimes you have to like shoehorn in a bad 4 of like to fit your strategy or whatever like this. But I think this card's just actually good, you know, and it fits in thematically with the deck. Next up, yes, we have an entire section for Takemikazuchi, mainly because he's kind of the only other card in the deck that like is actually a big part of the strategy. Which means it might be crazy that I'm only playing 2 copies. This might be a card you should go up on closer to 3 or 4 copies. I couldn't find room, but I'm sure it's there somewhere. On play, you can return 2 characters from your waiting room to your deck and shuffle your deck, and he doesn't lose soul by side attacking until end of turn. Obviously, you're just shuffling back your ice stock bombs with this, so that you're basically shuffling choice triggers back into your deck, right? So you can get your deck really small or whatever, especially if you like do the ice level 1 combo and then have like a small deck the next turn. You can play this and shuffle back some of your choice triggers and then trigger them. Or just making sure that you like always have as many copies of it in your deck as possible, so that you can just randomly trigger more choices is pretty good. It means on average you're going to be generating more stock or hand. He's also a Shimakaze Kai. On attack, choose one of your other characters, gets 500 times the number of your other characters, so a 2k pump on a full board. That effect is also just pretty decent, especially if we're trying to win board on offense. It means like this combined with the 1-0 combo is 4,500 pump into a lane, like 5,500 if you have a climax. Or you can just play this dude and pump one of your ice level 1 combo up to a reasonable amount, like 7.5, 8k. So just a good secondary effect, but it's mainly here for the shuffle back. It is not like a mandatory part of the strategy, but it definitely helps the consistency of it. And then other cards, because basically everything else in this deck is either just a generic good card that's here to progress our game, or it's a soul trigger that we added because we want to always have targets for our choice triggers. So first up is the level 0 first class adventurer ice. This is the 3,500 chaser. It's just a good oversized plussing 0. It has synergy with one of our other zeros, something I already talked about in the 12 event deck, which I'll mention again when we get there, but you have to have 1 or less other characters to be 35, so we have a way to bounce characters at our opponent's attack phase to make ice bigger again, and it's a chaser. So, you know, just overall good plussing 0. Choice for survival Lily is a drop salvage and gains a soul in the middle position of center stage. We're playing this over the Aina drop search because we need yellow to discard for a level 1 combo. This is a yellow card. Being 2 soul in the middle position is also just kind of generically good to attack mid-game with. And we don't have the best of selectivity in this deck because our combo is check 5, add 2. Most of our selectivity is going to be coming from choice triggers or brainstorms. So this just gives us one more way to get whatever cards we want out of Waiting Room. Next we have Encounter by the River, Ice, and Hestia. This is the level 0 that brings our 3-2 into play. That effect is just act. If you're level 3, you can pay to sack this to play the level 3 Ice. A lot of times this will just end up in my backstage because I will play it to, like... Well, okay, so the first effect is on play, pay 1, discard 1, look it up to X, add a card. X is the number of other characters you have. So a lot of times early mid-game, I'll play this to try to find a Climax to play. And then it'll just sit in my back row until level 3, at which point it is effectively an additional copy of the level 3 because you can just pay to sack it. Play the level 3 from Waiting Room. That's same resources as just actually playing the level 3. Maybe even less if it already being on board means you got to go to 7 hand. That technically saves you a hand if you played it early. But yeah, we like this because, well, A, it's yellow. B, it lets us find our climaxes, which is something we can't do super well since we don't have like gate or treasure triggers. And it's a 5th copy of our level 3. So good stuff all around. Playing 2 copies of the Climax swap, and the level swap effect is actually relevant in this deck. We're playing 3 copies of the Ice early play, which has an experience effect that requires a copy of itself in level. Most of the time, if you had an effect like that, you would just, like, snap play 4 copies, because you need to get 1 in level. Since our Climax swap is a card we want to be playing anyway, and it has built-in level swap, we're only playing 3 of the early play, and we're either going to get 1 into clock at some point, or we can use Tiona to force 1 into there, into our level, once we've leveled up. So I didn't think it was necessary to play 4 copies, just since 2 copies of Climax swap is... In my opinion, 2 copies of Climax swap is better than 1 copy of Climax swap with 4 of the early play, since the Climax swap is going to be good in the games even when the early play is not. So yeah, that's my thought on that. We have a Brainstorm, Expedition to the Lower Levels Fin. It's a pay 1 rest self salvage Brainstorm, and at the beginning of your Climax phase, you may choose 2 characters in your waiting room, put them at the bottom of your clock in any order. If you put 2, then at the end of the turn, you put the bottom 2 cards of your clock back into your waiting room. There are a number of cards tied to the Loki Familia that require a number of cards in clock to get power boosts. Typically, it's like 3 or more cards in clock, they gain a bunch of power. This could enable those. Finn powers up his underlings, of course, whatever. We don't play those cards, so that effect doesn't really actually matter here. Only time that's going to matter is if you're going to refresh in the middle of your attack phase, you can clock 2 cards and then refresh, like, compressed 2 extra, and then send them to waiting room after you're done, like, after you've refreshed at the end of the turn. So he's kind of cool for that, but otherwise he's just a vanilla salvage Brainstorm. We prefer salvage Brainstorm to search Brainstorm here because our level 1 combo is small on defense, so we would like to be able to salvage them back to loop combo after they die. That's a typical thing in my deck building. I think a lot of people probably agree with that sentiment. We're playing Qualifications of a Hero Bell. This is a red level 0, 500. This was our main plussing 0 in the 12 event deck. It is also one of our main plussing 0s here. Beginning of opponent's attack phase, pay 1, clock 1, return this to hand to return one of your other characters to hand. This means that we can field 3 attackers, attack 3 times, obviously, and then at our opponent's attack phase, by returning this and one of our other characters to hand, we turn the Ice level 0 back into a 3500, since now we have 1 or fewer other characters. And then she also has a full front row to chase to, since we've returned 2 of our characters to hand. In the 12 event deck, the second line of text on this was basically blank, pay 1, sack this if you're level 2 or higher to play Argonaut Bell from your waiting room to the stage. In this build, since we need an arbitrary number of soul triggers, we are actually playing 1 copy of Argonaut Bell, meaning that if we bounce these Bell Zeros to hand, or just draw 1 later in the game, when they tend to be rather useless, we can just turn it essentially for no cost into a 2-1 that attacks for a pretty reasonable power line. So I do like that. Level 1s, we have Q for the Feast, Loki. We're only playing 1 copy of this. It's just a 5th copy of our level 1 combo. This deck doesn't have like Ricky or anything like that, so it's kind of hard to select for specific characters early game. So Q for the Feast Loki is just on play, discard a character to search for the level 1 combo Ice, which, yeah, so it's just a 5th copy of the level 1, basically. We just discard whatever card that we don't need. It's basically a stockless drop searcher for probably the card we were going to use our drop searcher to search anyway. So I like that. That's fine. It's a nice one of. We play 2 Victory Feast Tione. I would be lying if I said that it wasn't mostly just because she has a Soul Trigger as a 1-0. But she has a cost 0 Stock Bomb, which I don't think is actually like super relevant right now. Sometimes being able to like Stock Bomb 1-0s is good. I can't think of anything super important right now other than like Slime Shizu. But yeah, sometimes it's important, I guess. I mean, it's gonna be good against any 1-0 deck regardless. I just can't think of anything that's like massively important against. And then second effect is on play, you can discard 1 to choose a level 0 or lower in your waiting room and put it on any position of your stage. This means that Tione is a technically also like additional copies of our 3-2 finisher. Since you can play her, discard a card, summon the Ice and Hestia 0, and then sack it to summon the 3-2. It can also just get your Brainstorm if you don't draw it, since like I said, our selectivity kind of sucks. Or it can get... I guess at level 2 you can get like the Bell 0 and then turn it into the 2-1. Or you can just get the Bell 0 and use it to plus by bouncing stuff back to hand. So, you know, various things that we can get off of that effect. Another consideration that, again, I don't know why I didn't put this in the other options. It was in the 12 event deck. The Hermes level 0, this pay 1, send it to memory, check top 3, add a character. You could get that off of this, and that's a cool interaction as well. Linked Wishes Lily. It has a Soul Trigger. It's a 1-1 anti-change Stock Bomb. You know, this is good against stuff like Rusha. It's just good against decks that have early plays. And it has a Soul Trigger, so we have access to it. And Act, pay 1, it gets a Soul. That's... I mean, that'll be useful every now and then, but probably not most of the time. 2-1 Ice, 7-5, compensating with a Lap Pillow. Thank you. Continuous during this card's battle, all players cannot play backup from their hand, and it gains 6,000 when it attacks at level 3 or higher. This, again, it has a Soul Trigger, and it is actually pretty big. It's 13-5, which usually isn't big enough to entirely escape like counters and stuff, but your opponent can't play backup during this card's battle. So anything that's like 13k or less, this is just going to run over and your opponent can't really do anything about it. I think that's actually pretty valuable right now with decks like Rusha and Kanata. I think a lot of those you're going to be able to like just barely scale over. Maybe you need a Climax for some of them, but I think they're planning on holding up counters, and you'll be able to just barely scale over them and deny their counters and be able to get some reverses that way. Vow of Atonement Lily is probably one of the least important cards in the deck, but since we are playing some relatively high power cards at level 2, I wanted to have some kind of assist that can make them a little bigger. So we have a level assist here. It also has pay 2, rest this card, Salvage, which isn't terrible. If you do manage to hit a bunch of choice triggers and get a bunch of stock, you might be able to make use of that. Otherwise, she's mainly just here to be a yellow card that is also an assist, which I think is better than like the Aina assist or whatever, just because, well, A, we have level 2s, and so 2k to level 3s isn't really as great, and this card's yellow. Argonaut Bell is the target that we're bringing off the 0-0. Has a Climax combo. That is actually blank text in this deck because we're just not playing the Climax. But the first effect is Experience 3. This gains 7,000 in Encore, meaning it's an 11k, 12-5 with the level assist. That's not enormous, but it's still big enough to like kill 2/2s, or at least force counters. And he has Encore, so if he gets over something and then the opponent reverses him, you can Encore him and then try to get over something else. And Experience 3 actually works out really well, because if you're putting the early play Ice into your level anyway, for her own effect, that's immediate Experience 3 for this card. We are playing one backup. A lot of our cards at level 2 don't let us play backups during their own battle, but if we're playing 8 choice triggers, it is nice to have a backup that we can get back to hand, because it's a Soul Trigger. And you know, some of our cards are just good on board even past like the turn that we like. If you play the ice early play and her effect wears off and you can play backups, having it is good. The 2/1 Bell being 11k means that this can counter to 13/5, which is like what 14/5 with the level assist, which is pretty good. This is also a pseudo like defensive counter. You can still look at the top card of your deck, put it on top or into waiting room. Slightly worse than like Leafa counter that lets you add it to hand and discard one. But better in the context of this set overall, since this set has so many events that just adding a character off the top wouldn't really be great, even though we're not playing events in this deck. Yeah, it's a backup. We're just playing one of it. Here's the ice early play. 2 or less climax early play condition. Experience, if a copy of herself is in level, this gains 1500 and cannot be chosen by your opponent's effects. And it is on play, it gains 4500 power, and opponent cannot, or all players cannot play backup until end of your opponent's next turn. Meaning she'll always be 13/5 when she comes down. She'll be 15k if you have experience, and then she'll remain 10/5 even after the 4/5 goes away, which is really big, honestly. And like being untargetable is just really good. So I do like this card a lot as something to clog up the board at level 2 if you can get the early play condition. Something just to clog up the board and protect. Being a soul trigger means we don't mind playing high counts of it, especially since we need one in level. And yeah, it's just good card to have at level 2. Fits in very well with the rest of the deck. We're playing 2 Little Rookie Bell. This is the early play healer that we used in our 12 event deck. It is really small and gains power for having events under it as markers. We're not playing any of the events that mark are under it, so it's always tiny. But it's an early play healer with a very easy condition. And since we're playing the level 0 Bell as like a red card anyway, we might as well fit this in to have access to healers at level 2. Especially with such an early condition. And it's just going to die, and then maybe we can salvage it back with our Brainstorm if we want to heal again, or we can get one off of a choice trigger, etc. Just a like decently playable card that heals. A couple other options I've got here, not many. Anti-change counter. You know, this deck might actually be able to get a decent amount of hand in it, since we're playing like a plussing level 1 combo, and we have 8 plussing trigger. We have like 12 plussing triggers, kind of. Anti-change counter might be worth thinking about. We're already very heavy in yellow, so this card is a lot easier to fit than in the 12 event deck, the Lily 3/2. It bounces your opponent's character and can side attack. 2 of the biggest decks in the format right now are Mushoku Tensei and Hololive, and they both have rest counters. Rest counters basically are only like safe to attack into on your last attack. So this opening up a direct and side that both deny counter step means that you're safe from rest counter just by playing 1 copy of this Lily. You could also try to fit in the level 0 for its second effect. Pay to discard 1 of the level 0 coin flip on attack to give itself and another character on cancel deal 1. I don't think that's actually as important in this ice deck, since our finisher isn't based around dealing extra damage, but is instead just based around confirming the damage that it is dealing. I don't think this is actually as good, because we're not going to be cancelled as often. But I would consider playing 1 copy of the Lily 3/2 itself, just for the bounce to beat out rest counters. And the last option, obviously you would have to play the blue Brainstorm instead of Finn if you do this, which I'm not sure if it actually makes it a little hard on your yellow count in the deck for the level 1 combo. It shouldn't. Though your second effect on your Brainstorm is still just going to be dead text, since we're not playing any events. This is an early play heal. If the Hestia Brainstorm is in your clock, it's -1 level. It is an 11k on a full board, which is a lot bigger than the Bell 3/2. And it heals the bottom card of your clock to your waiting room. So if you are wanting to use your choice triggers to build resources and focus on looping early play healers more, you can opt for this and probably try to fit slightly higher counts of it as your main level 2 game, instead of just having the Bell as sort of a secondary early play as a healer. But I think that might be a decent way to take the deck. The Takemikazuchi 0 is already blue, So it shouldn't be that hard to fit, like, enough blue to make this realistic. Like, obviously, you're going to have to clock the Brainstorm anyway, so any amount of blue is fine. But yeah, in conclusion, this deck is... I wouldn't say it's something competitive that I would play. After playing around with this deck, the thing that it does is really cool. But no part... Like, nothing that I could find to put in this deck was actually, like, just so strong that it really felt worth playing. It's just kind of a cool novelty deck. 12th choice. This is the first time in English that we've gotten a card that gains a trigger, which is really cool. So I definitely wanted to mess around with it. I like ice. I've got the ice sleeves, so, you know, we had to at least try it. And the deck's not bad by any means. I'm not saying this is a deck you shouldn't play, but it's certainly not as strong as I was hoping it would be. It's a little inconsistent to actually hit enough choice triggers to make a difference, is part of the problem, right? Japan has a number of decks that use this like 12 climax trigger thing, but the ones that have been strong are the ones that gain standby trigger. Because, I mean, if you think about it, triggering a standby is a lot more impactful than triggering a choice. Because instead of just being like a stock or a hand, standby is often, you know, like 2 stock and a hand, which is just kind of crazy. And like opening a lane on board. So it's like 2 stock, a hand, and a soul or something. But yeah, this deck's cool. It's definitely neat. If you're a fan of ice, you should check it out. There's probably some numbers you could change around, go up a little higher on Takemikazuchi count. Maybe cut... I'm not sure what I would cut for that. That's hard. Yeah, you have to keep enough soul triggers. That's kind of the awkward part, is that there aren't, like, a lot of the good cards you want to play are not soul triggers in this deck. So, I don't know. If anyone has any suggestions on how to change this, make it a little better, or if you've been trying it and having a lot of success, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you all next time. We will either have another Donmachi deck, or we will have a Tokyo Revengers deck, since that is also coming out soon. You can find me on Twitter at BoatsDon'tSink, and you can check out our store at Iron City Games on Facebook or ironcitygames.tcgplayerpro.com. We've got any number of singles up on there, or you can pre-order upcoming sets, sealed product, or play sets. So check us out there as well.